Hey, I'm Megan. I'm an aspiring children's illustrator, and today I want to share with you my sketchbook system and how it helps me develop illustrations for a project. Now, the project that I'm working on at the minute is an original story concept surrounding a series of families with strong shared interests. It's a little bit of a reaction to how disconnected we can be these days, so there's an emphasis on hobbies bringing us all together. I really enjoy exaggerating everything, being really hyperbolic with the way that the families express their shared interest. The theme is everywhere, from the way that they decorate their house to the way that they decorate themselves, and it all starts in my sketchbooks. So, one thing you might want to know about me is that in uni, I was always being told, Megan, you need to work on development. We like what you're creating, we like your final pieces, but we just have no idea how did you get to them. And I'll be honest, I was a little resistant to development. And the reason for that is because I always have this strong vision of the final piece before I even begin a project. And also, I know that it's going to take me a lot of time. As a traditional illustrator, the details take an age sometimes, and I didn't really want to be wasting any of that time on a project, thinking through like a million and one different thumbnails that I knew deep down were not going to go anywhere, let's be honest. But ironically, since leaving uni, you know how it goes, development has become one of my favourite and one of the most important parts of my process. So I think one of the reasons why is because I've come up with my own system for it. Back then, the process was kind of like you had one big sketchbook and everything went into it. Mood boards, notes, revisions, all sorts of development, and sometimes even the final piece. Now, that was a lot of pressure to me. I thought of it almost like this presentation of a project from start to end, and almost like it was an artifact in and of itself. Rather than focusing on the artwork, I thought about this book as an object. And that sort of put me off a bit. So first thing I did when I started creating my own system for developing a project was I split it into multiple sketchbooks. It took that pressure off and I didn't perfect things in the same way. Second thing I changed was my mindset. So back then, I suppose because of the way I was thinking of this book as this presentation, I thought of the project as this linear journey towards an end goal, a known end goal, especially because, like I said, I kind of have a bit of a vision of what I want the final piece to be. So any development kind of was a little bit fake and was almost me like working backwards from the end point. It was every like logical step that would get you to that end goal that I knew was going to be there. Whereas now, in my system, I'm thinking of it more circular. It's an exploration. It's an exploration specifically of like the whole world that my story is going to take place in. I'm bouncing around, it's not towards one set goal. It's very much like here, there, I'm going with the flow. Another thing I was considering when I was starting to create my sketchbook system was what kind of illustrator am I? Because there's not just one type and therefore there's not just one system that you should follow in order to get to an end goal of an illustration, right? And so I started to think, you know what, these days I'm sort of thinking of myself as part illustrator, yes, but also maybe part designer. And so I thought, how about having these multiple books where I put a different sort of hat on, so to speak. So what I do is in my A4 sketchbook, my little sketchbook, I put on my designer hat. And so in here goes things like fashion designs, interior designs, and this is where, like I said, I'm really exploring the world and bouncing around, and I'm really just feeling out the theme of a project. So especially with this one I'm working on with the families with those key interests, is very thematic, and so this is a bit of a design book of the theme before we get on to the big A3 sketchbook. And this is where I put on my illustrator hat and I bring together all of those design ideas, all those concepts from the small book, and I use my illustrator hat to finalize them, to polish them off. This is just final pieces. And so it's really nice having this separation. So I want to show you more, and so let's get into it. Let's start with the small sketchbook. So we're starting with the little book, and you're probably thinking, what even is that, Megan?
Well, for starters, it's some colour experiments. I always start by deciding on a colour scheme. I love bold colour, as you may tell from my outfit, but I also just think colour is the fastest way to communicate with an audience. It says something about the tone or mood of a piece right away. So here I'm picking warm, earthy tones, since this is the start of a scene surrounding a foodie-themed family. They love cooking together at home, which is a cosy image, so the colours reflect that, as well as reflecting some of the ingredients they may be using, like herbs, spices. I then move over here to just start blocking out some shapes in the chosen colours and patterns. I knew I wanted patterns in the wallpaper and the tiles, but I also knew I didn't want them to clash too much and distract away from the characters, which in narrative illustration is often the main focus. A lot of my process tends to be reining in my maximalist tendencies, to be honest with you. We then move on to a thumbnailing page, quite the classic for development in uni, and here I am attempting it again. But you'll notice a key difference here. There's only two. One for a single page spread, one for a double page spread. And that's not to say that I haven't considered the layout carefully. A lot of work goes on in my mind before getting to the paper, and the good thing about making a personal project is that you don't have to show your workings out at every stage. I use this sketchbook only when I need to. Often my thought process involves a lot of gathering of images and imagining myself into a scene. I actually use two Pinterest boards to inform these thumbnails. One is an inspiration board and one is a reference board. The inspiration one can be anything, from interiors and outfits to fabric swatches and even individual objects that have piqued my interest. Then the references board is much more practical, poses for my characters, examples of perspective, and this was particularly useful at the start of this project, when drawing in perspective was new to me. So, as I started this page, I put the final colour scheme at the top. I've locked it in and this is what I'm working with from now on. No going back. I like having it there since I find it much more stimulating than just a black and white page. And it's far easier for me to visualise a scene when I can imagine drawing a line from the colours to the image. You see at the bottom of the page a bunch of just random doodles. This is actually from when I started work on the finals and I kept coming back to work things through. There's some scrawny looking chickens and a squirrel with no legs. All these sorts of things, are only in this small sketchbook. You can see why they didn't make it to the big one. Moving on now to the final line art. Now, this time it's on loose papers, but I quickly adapted my system to include a third sketchbook just for this line art stage. And believe me, there's a reason for that. I had to use washi tape to keep these pages together, and if you know washi tape, you'll know that it was a nightmare, slipping and sliding everywhere. It was so hard to draw over this divide. But we made it through and I'm really chuffed with this. You'll see it stays very true to the thumbnail, just adding in lots of little details like a herb garden, cute chicken shaped salt and pepper shakers, and dry goods lining the shelves here. I keep working on the line art at this stage until I'm happy with it. I don't like restarting every time I want to make a small revision, so there's lots of rubbing out involved. And that's why I don't add colour straight onto this layer. It's too smudgy, and if I was to put watercolour over this, even after rubbing out, some of that pencil would get trapped in, and that's not a look I'm going for. So I trace this line art and I transfer it to the final sketchbook in the system.
And now is what we've all been waiting for. The big A3 sketchbook. Dale around me. Now, I did not mean to buy this sketchbook. It was nearing the end of uni, there were deadlines left, right and centre, and I was panicking. I was at home, there wasn't a lot of art shops around, and so off I popped to WH Smith. There was a one A3 sketchbook left, and it was £16. £16! Now, if you're going to take any piece of advice from this video, let it be this. If you don't want to be buying a fancy sketchbook for the rest of your life, do not buy your first, because you will never go back. I now have 2 of these sketchbooks and I'm probably going to keep buying them every time I run out. What can I say? The paper becomes your friend, really. You know the way it's going to react to your paints, to your pencils. It's predictable, it's nice, you don't want to go back. So yeah, suffice to say, final illustrations only go in here and now else. So let's get into it.
Here's the final coloured background. I start with a layer of watercolour to lay down the colour, and then I go in with coloured pencils for things like patterns, textures and small details. I tried to hold back from using the pencil too much for tone, because I like to save tone for the characters so that they can pop against the background, no matter how busy I've made it. I'm really happy with this scene, especially as it's the first that I drew in perspective, and I think for the most part it's believable. It was also really interesting to work with neutrals, something I don't usually do, as I found it was much easier to mix and match patterns. We've got 2, 3 patterns here, and I'm not sure you particularly notice without looking closely, which is nice. And it's not over yet. We've still got the characters to get through, and for that we're bouncing back to the small sketchbook. I always start the characters with a fashion design. Well, fashion design is a bit of a generous term here. It's definitely more of a doodle. But yes, starting with the outfit helps me get in the mindset of the character. I'm not going too crazy with the design here. We all know what chefs wear, but it's a little twist. Instead of chef's whites, they're chef's beiges, shall we say. And I bring personality through pops of mustard and rust. You can see here I'm experimenting with little touches. Should I add a bow, some cute buttons, some embroidery? I ended up picking the design on the right. Simple but unique enough. Straight from there, we go into the line art. I must say, people aren't my strong suit, or at least they weren't when I was starting this project. I have a little bit more practice under my belt now. So you may notice his wrist. Oof, looks painful. But overall, it's not too bad of a drawing. Then, his daughter. Well, I've been told she looks like she has a bit of a spine issue. I object! I'd like to think she's just smelling the food they're cooking. And here, the dog. A Labrador, naturally, since this is the foodie family, and he's sneaking food off the table. Time to bring out the big guns. Let's return to that A3 sketchbook. Here's the final coloured versions of the characters. There's something a little ominous about the dad's face. Maybe it's those orb-like eyes or the smirk on his face. But oh well, I'm pretty happy with the way I've drawn the trousers here at least. I let the watercolour be a little bit blobby, and then I brought out texture with a sharp pencil. You'll notice that the dog is sideways. At this point I'd even taken scissors to the book, so it's a space-saving endeavour. I like to draw the characters and background elements separately so that they don't get in the way of each other whilst I'm refining the line art. It's nice for me to think of the background almost like a doll's house, all set up ready for the dolls to be placed there. And I placed those in digitally, which I'll show you now. This is the final version, photographed and then edited together digitally. I am of course mostly a traditional illustrator, but it helps to combine things digitally since it frees me up to draw things at whatever scale is most comfortable. I also ensure brightness and saturation are at the right levels. I'm very happy with this final piece, and I even enjoyed my journey to get here too, which helps keep me motivated. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my sketchbook system and seeing a little bit of my art. As you may have noticed, there's plenty more work in these books, so stay tuned to see more. Thanks for watching, bye!